Before I get to the agenda, I just want to put a plug in for our leadership team and thank them for their service. And we are actually looking to expand our team. We've had 3 applications so far, and we're looking to add up to 4. So if you're interested in helping plan 3 to 4 meetings a year, we'd love for you to just send myself, and I'll put my email in the chat, an email about why you would like to join and help us plan these things. And online today with us, we have Rupam from Metropolitan Water District, Mark Milan from Data Instincts. I don't think I've seen Patsy on, or Melanie, and Gina, my vice chair, could not be with us today. But we'd love to have more people join us and spread the love. So I'm super excited for our meeting today. First up, we have Natalie Monroe from the city of Bellingham. She's the communications and outreach coordinator. And I saw her at the Denver National WateReuse Conference do a version of what she's going to present today, and it was outstanding. And so I caught her in an elevator and said, "Hey, would you like to present for our communications collaborative?" And she said yes. So I'm super excited. She will be up next. And then also we have Brenly McKenna, the new managing director for WateReuse California, with us, who's going to introduce herself, and she has a slideshow as well. And if there's any time left, hopefully, Rupam, you can step in and do roundtables. I emailed you, but I wasn't sure if you got it before the meeting since Gina's gone today. And then our next meeting is actually in person at WateReuse, California on September 17th at 8 a.m. So I hope you all can join us at the conference in Garden Grove. And then our last meeting of the year will be December 12th. So I am now going to stop sharing and pass it over to Natalie.
Okay, we practiced this before, which means that the screen share will inevitably just not work. Give me 1 second. Okay. Do you see the things that you are supposed to see? Friendly, I can see you. Can you give me a thumbs up? No.
No, not yet.
Okay.
It's all good. There we go.
Now?
Perfect. Looks great.
Great. Okay. Well, first of all, this is my first time attending this meeting, and I have heard about this group so many times, and so I am really excited to be here. I've been wanting to attend one of these meetings for a long time. So thank you. I'm excited to talk about this today. Just a couple of quick notes. So when I originally put this presentation together, it was for the WateReuse Symposium, knowing that there would be some communicators in the room, but also I was talking to people who are maybe not as familiar with communications. So we'll breeze through some of the stuff up top, because I know that this group in particular knows why communications is important. But then I really want to talk about the science of communications and what it is that is happening in our brains that is making a message work or not work. Couple of things to flag. I am specifically talking about communications. So I know that engagement is really, really critical and important to our jobs, makes our plans so much more resilient. But really, this is kind of a deep dive in communication and language and information processing. So we'll talk about why it's important, talk about why it matters, and then we'll really spend the bulk of our time talking about how our brains process information and how we create messages that stick. So the first thing, and again, I know you know, but water is so personal to people. And we have to remember that when we're starting out any communications in this field at all, because we have to think about, like, when you're talking about energy, or you're talking about climate, or you're talking about all of these things, they're important and people recognize they're important. But it's not as important as water, right? Everybody has a very personal connection to water. It is something that we drink. We physically put it in our bodies. It is what we bathe in. We bathe our children in it. We put all of our really expensive houses on lakes and oceans because we like to look at it. We like to recreate in it. There is so much personal connection to water. And so people are going to inherently care about this issue a lot more than they're going to care about energy efficiency or any other kind of public worksy infrastructure-y type of comparison. So we have to know that whatever people's backgrounds are, water is going to be really important to them. And water can be really scary for people because you can't really see what's in it. And unfortunately, there's some very salient examples of things going wrong with water, right? Think about Flint, Michigan. That has probably little to do with what we are doing when we're talking about water reuse, but people think about that trust, right? And that lack of trust, and that they didn't know what was in the water. And so that not knowing means that you're always going to be working from behind, even if it's not you, right? Those examples are going to be very familiar for people and are going to be what they think about. And so whenever you're talking to your community, no matter how much trust you have built, no matter how much great work you've done, you have to come into these conversations knowing that the stakes are really high and that you're working from behind. Okay, so what is our goal when we're talking about this? And why does it matter about the science, right? Our goal is to make communication that is going to be simple, memorable, and repeatable. Okay. The reason is that you're not always going to be the most trusted conveyor of information as a utility, as a government, as a consultant. The information that comes from you is A, going to have limited reach, and B, is going to come with a little bit of a grain of salt for people. But the information that they're getting from their neighbor or their coworker or their brother-in-law is going to feel a little bit more credible, right? So we need to arm people with messages that they understand and that they can repeat. And that's why it's so critical to understand the science behind how we're crafting these messages so that we understand what sticks in people's brains. What are people going to remember? How are we going to put messages out into the world that aren't going to be misconstrued and aren't going to just kind of stay in their small little silo? I mean, I'm sure we all know, we all have colleagues that have probably written the very best white paper that nobody's ever read, right? The paper that falls in the forest and nobody heard it, right? So we need to make sure that the communication that we're putting out there is something that is going to be able to move past whatever our communications channels are. So that's why the science is important. I'm going to blow through a couple of examples really quickly, and we will come back to those at the end. So this is the first one. Clean water is green water. Okay, and we will come back to that. The second example, reuse is safe, reliable, and renewable. And again, we'll come back to that. So let's talk a little bit about information processing. So when it comes to information processing and the way that the brain works, we absolutely know so much more about what is in our water than what we do about what's in our brains. And there are a lot of different frameworks for understanding how we process information. And so definitely you could come at me after this and be like, well, I heard about this one, I heard about this one, there's a bunch of them. But what we're going to talk about today is heuristic and systematic processing, which is one that's been around for a really long time. It's referenced frequently, and it's really just very useful for what we're talking about right now. So heuristic. Some of you are probably thinking, why did you use a word like that when you could have just used a word like shortcuts? Because heuristic means shortcuts. And I did that on purpose because when I go to these conferences that are full of engineers, I like to throw one or two words in there that show that we know big words too. Because I have had to Google words in so many presentations, I had to get one in. Okay, heuristic processing is actually what it's called. Heuristics means shortcuts, and I'm sure that a lot of you are very familiar with this because you've probably taken some sort of internal bias training at work, right? Where we talk about the shortcuts that our brain makes. Basically, when you're walking around, you get too much information in a day for your brain to have to decode and decipher every single thing that you see, right? You can't look at a tree and be like, wow, that is tall and it's straight and it has branches and it has leaves. I wonder if it's a tree. That would be a very, very, very exhausting and unproductive way to live your life. So your brain has shortcuts to help us know what's credible, what do we believe, what do we not believe, what something is, right? Your brain is full of shortcuts, and this is how you're going to process most information. Okay, if you're scrolling through headlines, if you're on social media, if you're on TikTok, if you're having a conversation with a coworker, excuse me, you're going to be kind of in this type of processing where you are using shortcuts, connecting to other things that you know about, and making kind of snap impression judgments, right? We're talking vibes here. Systematic processing is where you're going to be really diving deep into something. So this is really where we're going to be talking about the things that we work on, right? When you're trying to make a decision about recycled water, if you are working in this profession, you know that you need to be thinking about some of the technical things. You need to be thinking about the technologies, the finances, the policies, and how that's interacting with some of these other pieces. How is the community receiving this? What does leadership think? What are the virus log removals of the membrane filtration, right? There's so much information goes into being able to make an educated decision. And we all have things that we are systematically processing, but we can't do that for everything. And I like to use an example that maybe is only salient for me, but it's nice to like take yourself out of your workspace, right? Because it's really hard when you know so much about something to understand how little other people know and how they're going to approach it. So when I think about this, I like to think about taxes, because I know that if somebody is doing something to change taxes, it's important and it affects me. And also that I don't know anything about taxes, right? I don't know much about tax structures or deductions or deductibles or any of those things. I barely know what those words mean half the time. And so when I see information about that, I'm not going to engage with it very deeply. I'm not going to go in a deep dive because I don't even have the basics. So you need to approach how you're communicating with people, thinking about these heuristics, thinking about these shortcuts, because that's where they're going to be. They're not going to deep dive into something that they don't know anything about. Okay, so how do we process language? Let's talk about some of these heuristics. So verbal processing. Our brains process written language the exact same way that we process spoken language. What does that mean? So basically, they were doing a ton of studies about how kids learn to read. Do they learn by like context cues, or should we be teaching them phonics? Out of that, somehow, somewhere out of that research came that we learned that the way that our brains are processing language is going through the same neural pathways as when we're hearing it. So if you read it on a page, your brain is processing it as if you're hearing it. So that's really important when we're crafting our messages, because if it doesn't work verbally, it doesn't work on paper. Okay, so if you think that because it's written down, you get to write a whole lot more things or more complicated things, your brain is processing them the exact same way as if you were saying them out loud. Aesthetics. This one seems so silly, but if you really think about it, it's true. It just is. It is what it is. That if something looks nice, it is more credible in our brains. We give it credibility because it looks nice. So my example for this is that last October was election season. We had a mayoral election here up in Bellingham, and I was walking into the library and this guy hands me a pamphlet. It is a trifold pamphlet, which I already not a fan of. And it is black and white on like regular computer paper, probably printed it inside. And it is just blocks of text. There's like maybe one grainy black and white photo on the front, but other than that is just text, 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 text through the whole thing. And I looked at this thing in my hands and my first thought was, well, that's sketchy. I didn't even read it. I didn't even look at it before I made a judgment of this doesn't feel credible. This feels sketchy because of the way it looked. That is a shortcut that our brains like to use. If he had handed me something that was glossy and pretty and printed with all of the colors and all of the images, I probably would have looked at it and I would have given it a thought, and then I would have judged maybe the content in it. But the look of it was sketchy, and so I judged the whole campaign as sketchy, right? So it's really important for us to know that it's not just important for people to want to read something. We have to compete for their attention, et cetera, all the reasons that we use that we have to make things pretty and hire graphic designers. But it actually translates to credibility and how believable your program is and how believable your message is. Fluency and availability, these are really important. Fluency is if it's easy for your brain to process the information, if it's really easy and simple to understand, you're going to give it more credibility. So basically what that means is if I were to come up to you and I were to say, hey, this really, really, really complicated message, this is so hard. We have all of these things, all of these pieces. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. If I didn't understand you, I'm not going to say, oh yes, I believe you just because you confused me, right? I feel like especially when we're talking with our project teams and we're talking with engineers, we really get into this space where we're talking about like, well, people need to understand how complex these decisions are, how difficult it is, the trade-off between this and that, between the financials, between the technologies, between the log removals of something or the other, right? But if we can't explain it to people in a way that they're going to understand, it's not going to be credible at all. And then availability goes along with that a little bit, and this one is really important. The more that you have heard something, the more credible it feels. So if I were to tell you something completely outlandish that connects to no other information that you have ever heard before, that feels a little bit sketchy. That doesn't feel credible, right? But if we're going to talk about something that you have heard a couple of times, right? Maybe you saw on social media and then you heard it on the news and then your coworker brings it up and you go, oh yeah, you know what? I have heard about that actually. That's when you're going to start engaging with the information. So we have heard probably multiple times through our communications careers that it is important to get your message out there. People need to hear things up to 7 times before they really start to process it. And it's because you're not going to get any credibility if you don't have that availability shortcut going on in your brain where you're able to connect this to other information. It's also very important, though, with that availability to understand what other information people are consuming that is relevant or related to what you're talking about. So, for example, if your community is talking a lot about PFAS, and with it is in the news, it is on social media, it is on flyers when they go places, they're seeing everything they can see about PFAS, that's going to be the association that they make when we start talking about recycled water, right? So we have to be aware of what is available, what information is available to the community that they're hearing over and over again, and how is that going to color what we're talking about. And then familiarity, again, if it feels familiar, if it feels like something that we would know or should know, or that everybody else seems to know, we're more likely to believe it. And weirdly, this one applies to like rhythm and rhyme as well, because that makes things feel a little bit more familiar. That's got a structure that feels familiar to us. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about before we get off the science is starting with why. And so if you haven't heard the talk, I link it at the end, that Simon Sinek gives on Start With Why, you should absolutely go after this meeting and go listen to it because it's great. But the premise is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Okay. We are wired to be social. We are wired to really care about what our group, our coworkers, our friends, our neighbors, what does everybody else do? What does everybody else believe? Do you believe what I believe? So when that comes to our messaging, that's really important because that's what people really need to know. If you want to come across as credible, make people believe that they believe what you believe and you believe what they believe. We are on the same page. We are the same people. We're jiving here, right? So when we're talking about recycled water is a what? That is a how. That is how we're doing this. What our why is really what are we trying to solve? Are we trying to create a resilient water supply in the face of historic drought? Are we trying to create economic activity and opportunities for our community? Are we trying to improve the water quality for families, for babies, for all of these very important things that we all really care about, right? That's the why. And that is the message that you have to start with. Make people understand that you believe what they believe what you believe, and that you are on the same team. It's really grounded in our biology, right? It is when people are talking to you about like using emotions, evoking emotion, the emotion that you really want to evoke is connection. That connection of, oh, we're on the same page. Okay, so start with your why. So let's talk about how to make some of these things work for you, not with you. So talking about concepts and solutions, keeping on with this kind of how do we get to that why? Think of your communication in terms of broader concepts that are going to be a lot more familiar to people. Don't think about groundwater intrusion and things like that. Think about climate resiliency. Think about equity, about connectivity, about water quality, these really big over drought, these big overarching things that already are familiar to people. People already have a framework to think through those types of issues. That's what you're going to want to connect to. Those are the types of whys that you want to weave into your messaging, and not just weave into, start with in your messaging. And then this often means that you go back to the very beginning and you define what the problem is. And I can't tell you how many times I've been on a project where I've had to, as the communications person, put my foot down and say, what is it that we're trying to solve? What is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do here? Because we can't get to our why and what we need to tell people if we don't know what the problem is. And a lot of times the solution to the problem is written right there in the problem. So like a really famous marketing example is when 7-Up first came out. They were compared to Coca-Cola because that was the other very popular soda at the time. And they were inherently second best. You're always going to be second best to Coca-Cola. Everybody loved Coca-Cola. And so they had to go and they had to look at this and say, well, the problem isn't ratings. The problem isn't drinkability. The problem isn't all of these things. It is that we are being compared to something that's different than us, where the comparison's not there. So they come back and their main slogan is that they were the uncola. They defined themselves differently. But you're not going to be able to find those unless you can come back and look at what is the problem that we're trying to solve. That big concept. Changing behavior is a whole presentation training all on its own, but I want to touch on it briefly because it does, I think, really it is impacted by kind of these same principles. And I think particularly when we're talking about finding those people to be your messengers out, you need to motivate people to get involved, right? You need to motivate people to say, hey, I believe in this too. Because as a resident, I want to know, do you believe what I believe? Am I going to get there with the city? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not, but I might get there with my brewery down the road. I like them. I trust them. I've known those guys, right? They're participating very publicly. And so that makes that connection feel a little bit more salient. That's a more trusted messenger for that. And so in order to motivate some of those partnerships, we need to know how to change the behavior, to motivate people to participate. Knowledge does not change behavior, though. If you go to people and you tell them all of the things, all of the charts, all of the graphs, all of the great things to explain why your presentation is right, why this is the right thing to do, this is going to help your business so much if you participate, that doesn't change people's behavior. What does change people's behavior is knowing that other people that they respect are participating. So I know that doesn't really feel right, especially when you're in communications and you're like, that's all we do is we just like tell people things. But think about it like this. So I am sure that all of you on this call have heard at some point that if you walk outside into your garage right now and you turn down the temperature on your water heater, you'll save yourself money. You will increase energy efficiency. You will help your city achieve its energy efficiency goals and climate resiliency goals, reducing greenhouse gases. Very noble thing to do. Benefits you, no downside. But have you done it? I would say probably not. Most people haven't. I haven't, right? The knowledge that this is the right thing to do isn't going to change your behavior. But they did a really interesting thing where they went around and they had a control group and an experiment group. And the control group, they just went around and said, hey, here's the facts. Here's why you should do this. And then to the experimental group, they went around and they said, hey, will you commit to going and changing your temperature in your water heater? And also, if yes, we're publishing an ad in the newspaper, the local newspaper that has the names of all of the people who have taken this commitment. Can we publish your name in the paper? They came back around like 6 months later. Of the group that they just gave the information to, 0% change. Nobody did it. To the group that they said they were going to publish their names in the paper, which by the way, they didn't publish their names in the paper. They just said they were going to. 75% of people had gone out and changed their water heater, right? So getting a public and durable commitment from people, that's what's going to change people's behavior. Also, things like yard signs, that's a public and durable commitment. And also, you're seeing all your neighbors are doing it. All the people that I believe that they're like me, right? They're my people. They're doing it. They believe this. I should get on board too. We need to try and talk to people about what they believe about themselves and how we are on the same page. Okay. So how to actually like build a sticky message. First of all, simplicity. But simplicity doesn't mean short. It means short and profound, right? We're looking for proverbs, not just short sentences. So this is obviously very hard if you have tried to do it. So this is going to be an example that is exaggerated and you wouldn't actually use, but what we're looking for is something like recycled water is saving California, right? Something that is short and profound. Unexpectedness is where you might be able to bridge people over from the heuristic processing into systematic processing, where they want to know more. You caught them off guard. This is kind of cool. You piqued their curiosity. When in a world that we live in where everything is vying for your attention all the time, to be able to catch somebody off guard and pique their interest, that is worth its weight in gold. This is one of the reasons that I think the beer worked for so long, is that it was unexpected. We're talking about wastewater utilities, and now all of a sudden we're drinking beer. Holy cow, that's so strange and different, right? I think a little bit of that is worn off because it's been done. I still think that those are really worthwhile projects and fun and great. But I think that that initial unexpectedness is what really caught a lot of people's attention. Credibility. Sticky messages carry their own credentials. Okay, so what that means is that when you hear something that carries its own credentials, it just kind of makes sense to you and it makes it so much easier for you to believe. So one example that we can see that has worked incredibly well is associating recycled water with toilet water. Because the credibility there is that it's gross, right? That took so little work. There was so little that had to happen in that messaging to make that work, right? So what is a credible message that could go the other way? Well, one of the most credible things that you can do when you're talking about water is have it taste good. Having people's personal experience with the water be positive. There's almost nothing that you can do to convince somebody that their water is safe and clean and great for them if it tastes bad, if it tastes weird, right? That personal experience. I will say, for example, whenever I go into a hotel, do you ever like fill up those tiny little plastic cups they give you out of the sink? And I don't know, somebody can maybe explain to me later why hotel water tastes so funny, but it comes out and it's got all the bubbles in it. And so it's kind of milky looking. And then it's just got kind of a funky taste to it. I know it's safe, but I don't drink it. I don't like it. It sketches me out, right? In a way that like I can't logic myself out of. And so understanding what those credible messages are going to be and the way that those are so hard to overcome and how can we use those to our benefit? Emotions. We have to be really careful with emotions, right? Emotional appeals are really, it's where climate change went so wrong, right? Where you told everybody the world was ending, the world is ending, the world's on fire, and then they go outside and it's like beautiful, it's 75 degrees and sunny and there's flowers in their garden. And it's like, oh, that fear kind of dissipates, right? So the type of emotions we want to connect to are emotions that are setting us on a path to somewhere better, right? We're connecting to hope. We're connecting to a feeling that we are working together towards the same goal to build a better world. Those emotions are going to be a lot more durable and are going to inspire people to be involved. And then stories. I know you've all heard that stories are important. And every time that I had heard stories were important, I thought it was just because it was more compelling. It was a more compelling way to tell people something. It's a more interesting way to tell people something. But really, it's that familiarity heuristic, because we've been learning information from stories our whole lives. From the time that you were born, you were taught that you're like reading board books with your mom and dad, right? Like this is how we take information. if this, then this, right? The problem, the struggle, the solution. We know where the important points in a story are to take the information and what types of lessons we should be taking from that type of structure, right? It's very familiar to us. Our brains are very practiced in it. And it's very easy for those little shortcuts to just take in and for that information to be a little bit more salient for people. Okay, so crafting some of these messages. I'm sure you know who that is, right? That was a president. He's a Kennedy. And I'm sure that most of you know why he's on the slide. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I'm sure you have all seen that, read that, heard that over and over again, right? That's not brand new information. That's very lasting and durable information. He was a president. He said so many things, I'm sure. I don't know any of them. That is the only thing that I know that he said. But that has just stood the test of time. I don't think I could quote like that any other president from that era. But that balanced statement just scratches an itch in our brain. Our brain sees that and is like, ooh, that is a pretty rock. Puts it in its pocket and holds on to it. That is really, really important. And the way, if you are able to craft your statement in a if this, then this type of structure, it really does go a very, very long way for that memorability, for your brain to be able to remember exactly what was said and repeat it back. Also, just that credibility heuristic, people just believe it. Your brain likes it, and so your brain says, yes, that is true. Is that fair? No. But it's how your brain works, and so you might as well hack it. Rhymes are the same. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. I honestly wonder if that trial would have such a durable and lasting kind of collective memory if it wasn't for a statement like that everybody can quote. Everybody remembers that. And it felt very true. Is that true? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know any of the details of the case. But I know that statement, and it just sounds true. It feels true. People remembered that years later, right? I couldn't tell you hardly any other details about that case with O.J. Simpson, in case somebody's not tracking. Hopefully everybody is. But the rhyme and the balance of that statement made it so durable in people's memories. And then speaking in threes. To be or not to be, that is the question, right? That three statement, that veni vidi vici, this, that, and the other. We say everything in threes. And I know that you have heard that before, right? You should put all of your messages in threes if you can. Why though? Because when you've got really short, repetitive statements that are sitting in threes, it mimics the sound of hyperventilation. It mimics the sound of excitement, of passion. And remember, if it's written down, we're processing it the exact same as if you're saying it. Okay, we're seeing somebody cares about this deeply. And if we believe that they believe what we believe, we're more likely to care about it too. Does that make sense that three individual little statements like that should convince us that it's credible and we should care about it? Not really, but that's just how our brains like to process information. That's how we hack these little heuristics. Oh, we don't want to keep going. Okay. Okay, so this works. If you're not a panelist, do you have the ability to chat? Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
We should.
Okay. Sorry.
I can also unmute everybody.
It's okay. If people can get into the chat, sorry, my dogs are like barking on the stairs. Hazards of working from home. If you can get in the chat, will you please type in what this slide said? And if you don't remember, don't put anything. And if you see somebody else's and it sparks the memory for you, don't put it. But if you just remember, I want to see how many people can put into the chat exactly what this slide says in the beginning. Okay. Either nobody's playing or the chat's not working.
They're saying chat's disabled. Okay.
Oh, okay. Doesn't matter.
The Q&A
okay.
box works though. They can type it into the Q&A box.
Oh, there. Okay. So seeing a couple of them come up exactly with what I said. Clean water, oops, is green water. So why did you remember that? I've said a lot of things here, but you were able to verbatim a slide that I was on for like maybe 15 seconds. You're able to come back and tell me exactly what it said. Well, let's talk about why something like this works. It's a balanced statement. Brain loves it, right? So scratching all the itches. It's balanced and it rhymes. Great. Very, very memorable. It is pretty, right? You've got a cute kids on a lake with the trees. The text is pretty easy to read and it's a nice text, nice font. The messaging that we are connecting to is going to make it feel like we believe what you believe, right? We're talking about clean water and we're showing kids because we care about your kids. We care about the youngest and most vulnerable people in our community. We also care about recreation. We care about the beautiful places. We care about our environment, right? That's what this image is going to evoke for us. So not only is it pretty, but it's showing that we believe what you believe, right? We've got clean water is a really, really simple, easy concept that people understand. They understand the importance of it. We don't have to justify that you need clean water. People get that. That's a concept that we're connecting to, that people can plug into right away. Green water is actually the reason I wouldn't use this in real life, because I think that your average person is probably going to see green water and have like kind of visuals of like algae and dirty green water. But to this group, I bet there was at least a couple of you that saw green water and thought about some other concepts like green infrastructure and environmental protections, right? Those different connotations of green that are probably a little bit more available in your brain. It's going to make this seem like a very salient message to you. Okay, so those little hacks, bringing them in here, that makes it so that I put this message out on social media. I put this message up on posters and people are going to remember it. That is the thing that they're going to remember. They're going to be able to take that and talk to somebody else about it. The city of Boise did a social media post when I was there about the recycled water program, and it was like silly, right? Like it honestly drew a ton of ire from some of our higher ups because it was basically a meme of Nicolas Cage and this like cheesy song, but the text on it said, like, the city of Boise is asking for ways to protect our water supply. And then the answer is that we've launched a recycled water program. It was like 30 seconds, but it caught people's attention. It was in a format that was very, very popular, right? And it was kind of that if then, that balance statement, that clean water is green water, right? You're able to actually communicate so much information with just a graphic like this. Okay, the next one. We won't mess with the Q&A on this one, but in your own brain, can you remember what this said? Right, we've got reuse is safe, reuse is reliable, it's renewable. We've got those threes, brain likes threes, okay? We have concepts, big concepts that we are connecting back into and tying into that people understand. They understand what safe means, they understand reliable, they understand renewable. We're not trying to talk to them about treatment technologies. Have that information available, but that's not how you're going to change people's minds and hearts and get them to just kind of chill about what we're trying to do with reuse, right? We've got the image of the kid. The kid is cute. The kid is in the water must be safe, right? So it is really, really, really both simple and hard. to implement some of these things, but I think it helps to understand why it is we need to use those types of tips and tricks, and that there is science that backs it up, right? It is not just your communicators coming in and saying, simplify, 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 but to go back to your leadership and say, we have to say these messages in a way that people will receive them, that people will remember them, that it is actually communicating to people. Because otherwise we might as well not say it at all. Or if we go out and we make it seem too complicated and too hard, we might actually lose our audience. We might actually be doing damage. So understanding the way that we process information, the way that we are able to actually reach people's brains is very, very vital. So here's some references. Feel free to like take a little screenshot, or I can send this out later. Really great things to check out, particularly some of those YouTube videos and those books. Fostering Sustainability, or Fostering Sustainable Behavior. I think he's coming out with a new edition this November. So if you don't have it yet, you might want to wait and buy that edition. But I will go ahead and wrap up. I think I am way early because I talked too fast, but that gives us a good amount of time for questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Natalie. So people can either raise their hand and I'll unmute you, or you can type it in the Q&A box if you have questions. No questions?
Nothing?
I'm not seeing any hands up.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, wait, did someone just pop in? Oh, how do you navigate escalating costs due to inflation?
That is a really hard one, because so when you're thinking about those messages, the sticky messages that carry their own credibility, right? The message that is going to have the most weight in that situation is not when you hear all of these news anchors come on and say, oh, the economy is actually better than it was 2 years ago. It's better than it was 3 years ago. It's better than it was 6 years ago. People's experience of it is always going to be the most salient thing. And so even if you are able to say things like, compared to our neighbors, it's not that much, or this or that or the other, the costs are going up. People's experience of inflation is that they are making more money with less buying power, and it's frustrating. And so you have to know that that is the hurdle that you're up against, is a stickier message than you're going to be able to provide. I would say that wouldn't be the focus of my communications. My communications would be on what we're trying to achieve, the bigger concept of, yeah, costs are absolutely high, but we are trying to achieve clean water. We are trying to achieve resiliency. We have to get these other things done, and cost is absolutely important to us, but we have to do this, we have to do that. We're trying to achieve these other things that are also very important to you. One thing that I really like to do when I'm putting together plans is if you're doing like a facility plan or something like that, people, if you go out to your community and ask really high level values-based questions at the beginning and ask people, what is most important to you as I'm putting together this plan? Is it cost? Is it environmental benefit? Is it emergency preparedness? Is it human health? All of these things, and ask people to pick their top 3. Cost is always on there, but it's usually not the top 3. It rises to maybe the 4th or 5th or 6th priority that people have. And so knowing what those other priorities are and focusing your message on those and keeping the conversation in the positive of what you're trying to achieve can really help. Does that answer your question?
Okay, the next question is, well, statement and a question. We are creating decent messages, but the harder part is getting them out to our customers. What are your recommendations for reaching people?
Yeah.
Great question. I think one that we all struggle with.
Yeah. Everything, everywhere, all the time. I would say there is no silver bullet, right? There's no one place that you're going to reach everybody. And that's actually why it's so important that your message is really memorable and is really repeatable, because you can't be the only messenger on this. You have to have other people in your community being able to talk about it, because you're never going to have enough reach to talk to everybody. And then something as critical as water, you really need to be getting further out into the community. And so I would say the best thing that you can do is enlist other people to help you share that message further than you can. So whether that's partners, whether that's like a volunteer group, when I was working in solid waste, we trained up 20 volunteers to be basically our like outreach specialists, that they were going to go and do like all of our tabling for us, and they were hosting dinner parties, and they were going to schools, and they were sharing our message about like all of the ins and outs of the recycling kerfuffle of the pre-pandemic era when everything went weird with recycling. But it reached so many more people than we could have. And so finding ways to kind of enlist those champions in your community is going to help a lot.
Thank you. Next question. How do you communicate effectively with economically challenged communities or those who have English as a second language?
English as a second language, again, I would say you need to rely on people who are probably part of that community and who are well trusted in that community. I think working with those people who are part of that community to translate for you, rather than just going out to like a service and saying, hey, translate this to Spanish, for example. A really good example of that was when I was in Boise, and we were trying to put together the terminology for our recycled water program. And we did a focus group looking at the terminology with Spanish speaking people from our community. And they told us that aquifer was not a word that translated into Spanish, that we needed to pick something like groundwater that was going to make a little bit more sense. And like, if we had just sent something out to get translated by translating service, we would not have gotten that feedback. We would not have understood that unless we had talked to people in our community who could kind of have that conversation with us. Now, obviously that is like a really high bar to like have a focus group for every single communication that you do. But when you're doing some of these bigger efforts and these bigger outreach, having somebody that you can tap to be like, hey, will you help me with this? Will you take a look at this? And then can you help me spread this word? Can we do something on Spanish radio? Can you share this from this platform? Things like that, because you might not be the most trusted person in that community. And then when you're talking about economically challenged communities, I think it is challenging because the issues of cost and inflation are going to be far more salient for that community. But I also would challenge you to, I don't think that because you're economically challenged, you aren't worried about your water being safe and clean, that you aren't watching the drought and wondering, are we going to run out of water at some point? And so keeping those values in place, like recognizing the values might be a little bit different, but some of these values are pretty universal. And that's why water, recycled water, that's something that tends to go across party lines, across socioeconomic lines, because it is really, really critical to have clean water. And I think most people can still recognize and connect to that value.
Thank you. We have a couple left, and I'll also, for these last two, if any of our other people on the panel, our committee team wants to chime in, I'm gonna suggest they do as well, because they're very specific. So Fan said, this is a fantastic presentation. I really appreciate it as an engineer with no background in communications. Do you have any advice or experience specific to purified water? I think there's a substantial difference in public acceptance of recycled water for non-potable uses versus potable. And how do we get over that hump?
That's a great question. I think, yes, that is like a big hump to get over. What I would say is what you need to target is not, how do I say this? You don't want your goal to be that everybody is so educated about this. You want your goal to be that this is popular. So you want to think about this as being something that is cool, that people generally have a positive association with. And let me tell you why. Potable water is an easy target, right? If you oppose it, and there are lots of people who oppose it for a lot of reasons, right? Like, they question the safety, they question the cost, they question the infrastructure in their backyard that they don't want to look at, right? Like, there's a million reasons that you will have somebody in your community come up when you put a target on it, right? If the first thing that your community is hearing is that critique, and if you think of this on a spectrum of like good, bad, and neutral, you started at neutral and then you just bumped everybody over to bad because they didn't know anything else about it. But if you go out in your community and you are doing a lot of work and you're talking about it all the time, and people have this availability heuristic of like, oh, hey, I've heard about this. This is really cool. People that I know and I trust really support this. Then when your naysayers raise up, you might get some people back into neutral. You might get some people all the way into negative, but most people are going to hear that and think, well, I already have feelings about this. I already feel good about it. Maybe I'll be a little bit more skeptical, a little bit more neutral, but you're not taking everybody over to negative. And so I think if you're framing up your goal as we want people to like this, not just we want people to be aware of it, and you're trying to achieve that, you're going to have kind of different tactics that are going to build that resiliency in. And then again, I would really spend time thinking about things like the taste of the water, right? Do a focus group where you are having people taste test the different mineral additives, because you usually have to add things back in when you're creating potable water, right? And then have people say which one tastes better, and then do that. And then take that out to table and take that to your local news channel and have them try it on air and make sure that the water tastes good in a way that people are going to all of a sudden believe, hey, yeah, this is something that I can feel is safe.
Mark, you raised your hand and then lowered it. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that that's one of the core purposes of this communications collaborative group, is that we always talk about how we can improve our communications about potable reuse. And so I would encourage you to keep attending these for all of us to learn more. We're always sharing best ideas, best practices about potable reuse in particular, and we could talk for many hours on that topic, but I know we're running out of time. Thanks, Becca.
Yeah, no problem. We have one question left. Thank you for your presentation. How much longer do we have to do the hard sell and promote and educate re-purified water, toilet to tap, when will people just be okay with it and it'll just be another source of water supply? It's $1 million question.
Long time. I would say while it is new, right? And I don't just mean new in your community, I mean new in a lot of communities, right? Like once you get over the hump of like a lot of people are doing this already, we've been drinking our water, recycled water for years, and it's been fine, right? Like there are examples of that, but there are less examples of that, I would say, than communities where it's new. And in any community where it's new, there's just going to be a lot of talk and a lot of kerfuffle and a lot of jockeying to really know if this is something that a community wants to do. And it's going to be posed as a question for a long time, as long as people are trying to bring it up, right? And trying to transition over. I do think, I can't tell you how many times I have talked to younger generations who are just like, wait, I thought we already did that. So I do think the younger generations are coming in with a little bit more of an open mind, because we've been talking about water cycle and things like that so much with youth, and water education and watershed education has been like really stepping up its game, I would say, the last like 10-15 years. But yeah, I would say it's going to be a minute. Sorry. Job security.
Right. Honest answer. I like it. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. That was again an amazing presentation, and we did record it. So once I edit out the practice part at the beginning, I'll have it posted up on WateReuse National's website page.
Thank you.
And if anyone has any last questions, I encourage you to reach out to Natalie. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now I'm very excited to introduce Bradley McKenna, the new Managing Director for WateReuse, California.
Hi, thank you, Becca, and thank you for having me. I'm excited that this is my first communications collaborative group. So I think I just have some time to introduce myself, but I also have a few slides here just to kind of tell you some of the things that we are working on. So give me just a minute and we'll see how this goes. Okay. Okay, hopefully you all are seeing what I am intending to share.
It looks good.
Okay, thank you. And Natalie, I loved that presentation. I was actually making a note of several items, but I love that you brought up that knowledge doesn't change behavior. I actually first learned about this in it was a Coursera course I did a while back. It was about the science of happiness, but so much of that was actually in what you were presenting on in communication. So very interesting. And I appreciate that. And hopefully I can take some of that and learn it and apply it. A little bit about me. I am an engineer by trade and background, and I've been in the reuse world for about 15 years almost. I really started my water career at a smaller municipality just north of Denver called the City of Westminster, and I managed their non-potable recycled water system. It was mainly used for irrigation and mainly landscape irrigation. And then I went on to manage Denver Water's recycled water program, which did include permitting for on-site reuse, which actually they just turned on recently. So that was a long time. It was, I think, 7 or 8 years in the works there, in the making. And then I went to the Water Research Foundation, where I was for the last 7 years. I managed the subscriber services group, and this group really aimed at working with the subscribers, mainly water utilities all over the country, and some international subscribers as well, and making sure they were connected to the research needs. So I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with water utilities all over the world, and I'm so excited to hopefully bring some of that experience to California, and also to learn from you all. So it's a little bit about my background. And when I was thinking about what I was going to present to you, I actually wanted to share a slide that I have modified ever so slightly from when I did the interview for this position. And the question was, what are you going to focus on in your first year? So I thought that would be a good thing to share with you. Some things have changed because now I know more than I did, but I want to start here. And you'll see at the very beginning, I put the words community, collaboration, and communication, which fits in perfectly with this group. But that was really how I wanted to focus my attention and the efforts of WateReuse California, because I strongly believe the community of water reuse experts in the state of California is truly unique. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. And the collaboration really is also incredible. The regional partnerships and the scale of those partnerships in California is unique. And then obviously communication is so important. We used to say at the Water Research Foundation that research not communicated is research not done. And I believe that for so much of what we do, if we're not talking about it, then it's almost like as if we're not doing it. So I think it's such an important piece of what we all do. But this is a snapshot of where I will be spending my time, and there are a lot of things, some of which you could expect, like our annual conference in September, and looking at our engagement and member retention and recruitment, growing our opportunities. So these are maybe standard things, but there are some new items on here, and you guys are actually the first group that I get to kind of talk about some of these things with. It's still very preliminary, so I can share what I can, but know that we will be sharing more later this summer. And the first one is strategic planning. This one I'm personally very excited about. As someone new in this role, I have the opportunity to work with our members, get stakeholder input, and really craft the future of this organization for the next 3 years. So as a new person coming on board, there's no better way to learn about what our member priorities are than I think to do a strategic plan. So we'll actually be voting on this soon with our board in early July. And so this is something you could expect to hear from us. There will be a number of inputs along the way, some of which are standard, like a survey, for example. And we were hoping also to do some in-person listening sessions at the conference. I love the opportunity to maximize in-person time where we can, and there's no better way than at our conference. So that's something that just I wanted to put a plug out there, and hopefully we'll be able to talk more about it soon. And then this next one, I was trying to think of really what to call it, but I took a very broad step back and called it implementation programming. And that might mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, but essentially, you know, we have our DPR regulations in the state of California, and you know, now is time for implementation. Implementation needs a lot of things. It needs robust communication plans. It needs more research sometimes, and you know, it also, you know, could really benefit. All of us could collectively benefit from sharing this information and having a program established to help us do that. And so we're still working through some of these things, but I have noted, you know, of what I've heard so far from our members in terms of priority, it's funding, it's communications, and it's research. So these are some things that have been brought to my attention and that we're going to continue to explore a little bit more this summer. So something I'm personally very excited about. And then I wanted to share with you also just some of the things we're working on in the legislative and regulatory world, and then I'll share with you just a conference update here shortly. So let's move on from this. So this clip right here is from a recent LA Times article, and this is something we've been working on as an organization for actually several years. And it's a climate resilience bond where we're asking for a significant amount of funding to go towards water recycling projects specifically. So as of now, the ask is for $1 billion to be dedicated for recycled water. This is, of course, very uncertain. You know, the amount seems to ebb and flow. It is changing, I think, almost on an hourly basis. But we are hoping to see a ballot measure in November that would allow for water to be set aside specifically for recycled water projects. So there is a recent LA Times story that I put a link in here, and I can share these slides with you all later. But it's been a big focus of ours, and we're going to continue to do that. In theory, we should know by latest July 3rd if this bond measure will make it on the November ballot. So I guess this is those times where we kind of just hurry up and wait, but we are trying to wait patiently to see what happens there. This next one is new, and this is something that we've been talking about a lot in our legislative regulatory committee. This has been a big focus of ours. There will be new permitting fees for our recycled water permittees, and this was a part of a 2023 budget trailer that essentially allocated more staff for the state to help permit these projects. And so 15 additional staff were added, and these permitting fees are going to cover the costs of those associated staff. And so we have been actively engaging with the state on these permitting fees, and we've reached a good place, and we're hoping to make some more progress on this. But I just wanted to list a few of these guiding principles that we've worked very closely with the state on, and these are we should remain revenue neutral. The goal is not to make revenue from these permitting fees, that the fees should be spread broadly across the members. And then based off of relative size, this was a big ask for us and for our membership. And because at one point it was kind of a one size fits all and everybody paid the same permitting fee, they also gave us an option that was actually looking at the design capacity of a treatment plant rather than the actual flow. And so we have worked with them very collaboratively to help kind of shape some of their guiding principles. So we're seeing now that the fees will be based off of the relative size and the actual flow associated with a treatment plant. So we see this as a win for us. And I just put together a quick timeline. So for those of you who aren't in this world, you could expect some more information in the early fall or late summer, early fall. The beginning of September is what we are anticipating right now. So this is something, again, we've been very actively engaged with in the state and with our LegReg committee. The next one is our conservation regulations. So the vote will happen sometime this summer. There was supposed to be a hearing July 3rd, and we are anticipating that to move also. I'm noticing a trend here that things seem to ebb and flow. Shift happens, as we like to say. And we have submitted our comments for the last formal revision of the conservation regulations for making conservation a California way of life. And we believe we've captured our members' feedback and had just a few minor adjustments and a few asks just to make it a little clear on some of the language within that. And the next one here is the Cross Connection Control Policy Handbook. That's a fun one to say. This was actually adopted late last year, and it will be effective July 1. We are trying to work through a process now where we can be engaged with the state a little bit more on this because there were some challenges with some of the requirements for a dual plumbed system versus a dual source system. So there's just some, we'll say, different interpretations of the language. Again, why this is so important and that we get the language right. And so we've been informed that this will be a living and flexible document, this handbook. So we're going to continue to work with the state and then eventually forming a subcommittee to help provide meaningful stakeholder input. So those are the high level things that I wanted to share with you. And then the last one, again, if you're not in this world, and I am learning these things as well, is the intended use plan. This was recently released just last week, and this essentially will help dictate how the SRFs and with the intended use plan is for all of these. So there were some new projects and there was some money that we thought was previously allocated that might be returned back. So there are going to be opportunities potentially to fund some more projects through these grants. And so the IUP is out. Again, there's a link in here if you're interested. It's about 90 pages. It's not an easy read and the math doesn't always work out. As an engineer, I like to check the numbers and I didn't quite see everything adding up, but the good news is that there will be a workshop on July 2nd where we will work with DFA on this and hopefully give them some helpful feedback from our members. So those are kind of the main legislative regulatory updates that are of significance. And then this is my last slide here. Hopefully some of you have submitted abstracts, but that block has actually closed. The call, the abstracts has closed. We did receive a pretty good number. So hopefully some of you were able to submit those and we will be releasing a schedule later this summer. But I wanted to call out our early bird rate that ends June 25th, so that is coming up. And I also wanted to note the discounted hotel block will close late August. And the reason why I wanted to mention that is for those of you who are attending the symposium, the symposium was actually capped. They maxed out the capacity and actually had to turn a few people away. I want to make sure that that doesn't happen. I don't think we're going to be facing the same capacity constraints at our particular hotel, but I just wanted to put that out there because I would love for everybody who would like to attend to be able to, and for us to accommodate them. And I think one of the best ways is to make sure you register early and get that discounted rate. So I kind of went through that pretty quickly. I'm happy to spend time on any of those other items. And really at the end of the day, I'm just so happy to be here with all of you. I can't see your faces, but it is nice to virtually meet you. And for those of you I haven't met yet, so I just wanted to say thank you. And also, you know, if there's ever any questions or ever any needs that I can help with, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. That's it for me.
Thank you, Brenly. Does anyone have any questions for Brenly? Can you either put in the Q&A or raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Not seeing any. Well, thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to meeting you in person at conference in September.
Yes, the conference I think will be very well attended. What we've seen so far, so I'm expecting it to be a good conference.
Yay! I love hearing that. Awesome. All right. Well, we're gonna end it with a round table. Here we just like to hear what everyone's up to right now. If there's some issues you're having and you want some feedback from the group. Rupan's going. I'm gonna pass it off to Rupan and she's gonna run it.
Thanks, Becca. Hi, everyone. We would love to hear from you and what is happening in your world. So if you have a second to share, we've got 15 minutes left in the meeting. So if you would like to share, go ahead and raise your hand. We will unmute you, or you can also type something into the Q&A.
Hi.
And let's see, I'm going to actually maybe get this started and call on somebody. Mike McNutt, are you still on here? And I guess you can't say anything. We would have to, there you are. Awesome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
I
can.
unmuted you.
Oh, hi. Yeah, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I am sorry, I am driving. I just took my dog for a walk. It's work from home day, so forgive me if it's a little background noise. What a great, what wonderful presentations. Brenly is going to be an amazing administrator and do so much great work for WateReuse. I've met her and she's very impressive. So we are in good hands with our California WateReuse delegation, no doubt about it. I would like to share, thank you for calling on me, Rupam. So not this Saturday, but the following Saturday, we are having a tasting event called Pure Pizza. And so what we're doing is we're taking our recycled water, or I'm sorry, our pure water, and we're bringing in a local pizza company who's going to make pizza dough with our pure water. And in addition to that, we're also bringing in a company that's going to have shaved ice that will have a blend of pure water and regular water. We're also bringing in a company that does sorbet, and they're making sorbet with our pure water. And there's actually going to be pretzels that'll be made with our pure water as well. We're going to have games and obviously tours of our demonstration facility. So we're really trying to like give the impression to everybody that they can just have the same stuff that they always have, that they enjoy, that they like doing, and pure water is not going to inhibit them from anything. They shouldn't be concerned about anything. So that's one thing we're really excited about. And then the other thing, which I probably think Rupam was probably more inclined for me to talk about, is next week, I'm going to be giving a presentation on potable reuse to the LA County Medical Association. And that's our first sort of like endeavor into getting the medical community engaged in potable reuse. And yes, it'll be a little bit of a process to get an endorsement from them, but I certainly don't think it's something that's out of the question. And the other thing that we're doing is I'm working on bringing in the board for the Ventura County Medical Association to come in and do a tour with us. And within these two specific, like as we move forward with this, Rupam, we'd love to have you obviously involved to bring Metropolitan in and kind of just really get the ball rolling when it comes to potable reuse and having the medical community be ambassadors and be additional conduits of information out there. And this kind of goes in line with the, in my opinion, of our presentation, where heuristics potentially could evolve from having individuals who people may find credible and may kind of like highlight the safety concerns if there are any, and bringing in the medical community. So that's a quick update, and I'm so sorry if I took too long talking.
No, that's great, Mike. Well, congratulations first. I feel like a lot of the stuff you talked about ties into Natalie's presentation. Congratulations on the Pure Pizza event. That sounds fantastic. And I love all the ideas, and also on your connections to the medical associations, both in LA County and in Ventura County. I think those are exciting opportunities, and we would love to hear how it all goes at our next meeting.
For sure. Thank you, Rupam.
All right. Anyone else here want to share?
Rupam, I'll just mention that our next meeting will be at the conference, and it's scheduled Tuesday morning from 8 to 9. So if those of you attending the conference, you'll see it in the program once the program
On the
is
7th,
released.
what I believe that's the 17th, right? Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So save the date and time, everyone. We would love to see you in person there. That would be really great. Any other updates from folks? I'm looking at our list of attendees here to see if there's someone I can call on to.
We can always end early too.
We can always end early. I'll give it a Metropolitan update really quick. We just received a $99 million grant from the federal government for our Pure Water program. So we're really excited about that. I noticed that the city of Ventura was on as well. They also got some grant funding, as did LADWP. So those are the California agencies. Yeah, and it doesn't look like there's anybody else, right, Becca? Do you see anybody?
Oh,
No.
Jen Buckley.
Jen, yay.
Jen, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
We're still showing you as muted here, Jen.
She has permission to talk though. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't either.
Oh, did she just drop off? I think she might have just lost connection.
Okay. Well, Jen, anytime if we're on and you can unmute yourself and chime in, please feel free to do so. Anyone else want to give an update? Okay, Becca, I think we're all done here. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Rupam. Oh, let's see, what's in Q&A? Someone just wrote, regarding our water rates, the Taxpayer Protection Act has been removed from the ballot. Yay. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Oh, Jen looks like she just got back in. Let's see. Jen, are you able to unmute yourself now?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I had to go right when I unmuted it. It went ahead and died. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. No, thank you so much for, I mean, yeah, we were very excited to have been, received 30 million from the Bureau of Reclamation at that event too. So we are incredibly, incredibly grateful, and especially on at our time. I'm sure I had asked the escalating costs question, and I'm sure some of our other Ventura Water Pure team members are on this call. But yeah, we are in the thick of it. We are absolutely dealing with the cost of inflation and needing to really, remind folks about the benefits. But, even the grant money, I think, really helps with our messaging in that regard, where we're like, we continue to try to find as much support as we can and really tapping in to see how we can, really help offset those costs has been really, really important. So anyway, we're just so excited and so glad that we also received that funding. But we have an uphill battle ahead of us. So I'm sure everyone on the call does too, but glad to hear everyone's support, throughout the state and agencies, and it's really great. So thank you.
I was muted.
Thanks.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks, Jen, and all yours, Becca.
All right. Well, thank you for spending your lunch hour 90 minutes with us. And we hope to see a lot of you in September at WateReuse Conference for our in-person meeting. And then our last meeting of the year will be in December. And watch out for those emails and make sure your colleagues sign up. Again, thank you to Natalie and Brenly for joining us today. And I'll see you in September. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon. Bye.